I have an idea. Let's play a little game. Let's play a game. So
All right.
I
Ooh.
want you. Let's take turns. And I'm obviously a guitarist. You're obviously a drummer. Tell me
Yeah.
a guitarist that has influenced you in some type of way, or has they just meant something to you musically, and then I'll take a turn. I'll tell you a drummer, and let's just kind of see where that kind of goes.
This is great. This is great. Okay. Um, wow. Uh, there's a couple, man. There's a couple because I'm obsessed with guitar players.
Well, give me
Um,
one, and then we'll trade off.
I'll give you one. Yeah. Okay, so the first one that's coming to mind right now, um, is probably because at the peak of me like upset, like really branching out from my rock world. Like I grew up like you, only listening to rock, and it would be anything from like all the subgenres, classic rock, alternative rock, hard rock, didn't matter. But then I heard Continuum by John Mayer, and uh, that opened up a whole new sound to me because I was always obsessed with it. Like I play the guitar a little bit, but I'm not. I don't think I'm good at all. But I was always obsessed with the guitar sound. But as a drummer, there was something about the way he played. I didn't really. I had to go back and listen to the first two albums. I never really like it. Just never registered with me. But when I heard Continuum and then everything he did after that, his guitar playing there was just something different about it. His sound, like it wasn't for me. I'm used to hearing distortion. It was not
Hmm.
distort. It was for me very clean and funky in a bluesy, rocky kind of, and also poppy kind of way. And I loved that. It just like it. I was like, oh, like he's so rhythmic, especially because like he kind of does the Jeff Beck thing too, right? Where he finger picks uh, within songs, like not just a solo or something. Like
Right.
uh, yeah. So okay, I don't know if you're a John Mayer fan. I don't think we've ever talked about John Mayer, but
I love John Mayer actually. I think it's a taboo
okay,
subject,
cool.
but hold on, I want to show you something.
Okay.
This I bought this. That's John Mayer's signature right there. I bought this.
Oh
This
yeah.
this is a John Mayer signature Strat. So when I bought this, I must have been 20 or 21 years old, and I was looking for a Strat, this Fender Strat. I was looking for a Strat. I was working at Guitar Center my first time while I was in college. I sold guitars there, and I would play every Strat in the store. I'm like, man, I want to buy a Strat. We had a discount, and I wanted to buy a Strat. And then I saw this come in used, but I didn't. John Mayer at the time, like, oh, John Mayer, like he sings like Your Body's a Wonderland. Like I'm not even gonna play that. And
Yeah.
then from across the store, I hear this sweet Strat sound, the sound I've been looking for. And I'm like, what
Oh.
Strat is that? I played every Strat in this store, and I look and it's someone freaking playing the John Mayer Strat, and I'm like, oh my God. Like if he puts it down, I'm buying it. And luckily, he sat there for
Wow.
10, 15 minutes playing it. I not only bought the guitar he was playing, I bought the amp he was playing it through because it just filled the freaking store with this beautiful warm sound. So yeah, I've had this for so long now. It's been like 13 years probably I've had this guitar, and that
Wow.
really started my love affair with John Mayer because before that, I really didn't take his music seriously, but I heard this sound, and at the time I really liked Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan, so it was like a really nice,
Hmm.
really easy transition. But I really like a lot of John Mayer's contemporary music too. His last two albums are amazing, and he's another one like super
Amazing.
pushes himself and reinvents himself. And I I think
Oh
um
man.
I think the mic that I'm using is from my headset, right? You can hear me okay now? Is
Yeah.
it still
Yeah.
okay?
Totally good. Yeah.
I didn't want it to like sound like I'm talking the other end of the room. So yeah, so
No,
John
no,
Mayer, that's
great.
that's cool. Okay, so my turn, right? Drummer.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
this one, and it's funny because we cover a couple of his songs, and I say his songs because this is the first drummer where I felt like these guys are all. He's a drummer, but everybody's accompanying him, and it's Billy Cobham. He is like for
Oh
me,
man. Yeah.
I man, his music because it's not, you know, he's such an amazing drummer that everybody has to
Hmm.
level up. Like you got to, if you're playing with Billy Cobham,
Oh
you got to
yeah.
level up. And it's the first
Yeah.
time where I felt like, wow, this band is playing around the drummer solely. And
Hmm.
the music is so inspiring. The people that he plays with are just top notch, and everything is so tight, and it's just super inspiring from a guitar standpoint. I'm like, man, I wish I was that guitarist, not because of what the guitar is playing, but because of what the drummer is doing, you know? It just
Yeah.
you know
He's
that playing with a
unbelievable.
drummer like that would make you a better musician. So for me, Billy Cobham just
Oh
like
yeah.
blows like the roof off. Every time I listen to a Billy Cobham tune, I'm just like, Jesus. Yeah, it's just so good.
Oh yeah. Spectrum, that whole album is like life changing. I like, and that's another one. Every track, it's like there's so much exploration in every track, and in his drumming, it's just crazy. I mean, that record opens up with just an absolutely ridiculous. I think he's playing a shuffle, right? Double shuffle, if I remember
We
the
do
opening
two
track on that album.
songs off Spectrum. I
Yeah,
took
what do you
that
do?
album and we do Red Baron and
Got to.
yeah, and we do let me look at the track list real quick.
Like
Um
Stratus or something.
oh, and we do Stratus. Yes, we do Stratus and we do
Stratus,
Red
yeah.
Baron and like pretty much every set. I took the Spectrum album and I'm like, guys, pick some songs because we're doing some Billy Cobham, and it's really
That
pushed
is,
Dev too, our drummer, because we're a four piece, but I want everybody to like get their shine in. Everybody's a great
yeah,
musician. I want everybody to flex a little muscle at our shows, and like the Billy Cobham tunes. Believe it or not, every every show there's like some like older dude that comes up to me and they're like, man, that Billy Cobham, like they love the Billy Cobham, and I'm like, yes, it's
because he's a legend, man.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like, you know what's funny is I didn't hear. I heard him first on, is it Birds of Fire? Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Mm.
I think he played drums on that, right? In that
I'm
band.
not sure.
It's like John McLaughlin on guitar.
Mm, mm.
Have you? Yeah, which it's I think it's Birds of Fire is the name of the album, and it's just like, oh, dude, listeners, if you haven't checked out that record, hopefully I'm quoting the right record. You have to check it out. It's so good. Billy Cobham for sure is the drummer on that, and it's mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. Um, Man, that is a great pick. I wouldn't have actually. I had no idea what you were going to pick, so that is a killer pick.
Yeah, super inspiring. All right, so your turn. Another guitarist.
Okay. Yeah, where do I want to go with this? Uh, all right. Well, so I mentioned him already. So, and I feel like this next guy gets is talked about a lot more as a guitar player now, but I'm not sure if when he was like in his prime, if people were really talking about him because he was also like a pop star. But Prince, I I was always I've always been a big Prince fan. And obviously he's super funky, like, and so as a drummer, like those tracks are just amazing. But so here's this is just a funny little thing. So the first time I had known of Prince, right? When I was in high school or whatever, because like you just know it's like knowing Michael Jackson, right? When I was in high school, I think there was that. think it was a concert for George. I think it was called the George Harrison
Yes, yes.
like
He,
tribute thing.
he
There was
takes
like a
that
million
solo
musicians.
on My Guitar Gently Weeps and just like blows everyone
Yeah,
off the stage.
yeah. That so my dad was watching the concert, right? And I happened to like come out. So my drum set was in the basement, and I was like, I don't know, I was playing or whatever, practicing. I come upstairs, and coincidentally, like it was like divine intervention. While My Guitar Gently Weeps starts, and that was like the one I'm ashamed to say that I was never a huge like Beatles guy. Like I never I never got into it, and maybe because I'm a drummer, but and that's not like I'm not throwing shade at Ringo. It's just like they're not known for their drum parts,
Right.
uh but that was one song that always I always thought was cool, like that's just a cool tune. So it comes on, and I stayed and I watched, and I then saw Prince, and I was like, Dad, like Prince plays the guitar? Like that was I literally had no idea.
Right, right.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, that was really cool, And then shortly after that, I think I realized that he had a new album out, or he was coming out with an album. And I can't remember which album it was. I think it was Musicology, but I I instantly, whichever it was, either that or 3121, and whichever one it was, I grabbed it, and I was like, his guitar parts were so funky, and I was into like James Brown and stuff like that. So like the guitar
Right.
playing on those tracks, like I always loved. And so, but to hear it in like a modern pop kind of sound, I was like, this is so cool and funky. And I'm like, this is, and I know he can rock too. So that was cool.
Mhm.
So that would be my other guy. My next guy would be, because it's like how it inspired me to then want to go play the drums. So I'd be like,
Right.
ooh, I would love to be like you said with the Billy Cobham thing. It's like I'd love to be the guitar player behind Billy Cobham, but I'd be like, oh, I want to be. That's how I felt with Mayer, and that's how I felt with Prince.
Nice. Okay. Okay, so for my pick, I'm gonna go with a very predictable pick, but I was so influenced from such a young kid, and for me, it was like the sound of drums and John Bonham. I think everybody
Oh
can kind
yeah,
of, everybody can kind of, and it's such a boring pick, but it's only boring because it's so good. And uh, Led
yeah.
Zeppelin was the first time I think with a rock band where you could be like, there was like four equal standing pillars of of musicianship, and I mean it from the beginning to the end, from the first track, from Good Times Bad Times to whatever the last song is off, or I don't know if you count Coda, listen to the end of Coda, whatever.
Oh
They were
yeah.
just like hitting at all times, and you know it just like when I was young, if you know, John Bonham's drums were just like bombs going off, and then I kind of felt it took me a while to get into the Beatles too because I heard like Ringo's little kit, and I'm like, listen to John Bonham, and I'll just crank up Led Zeppelin,
Yeah.
and it's just oh man, for me that was just like the sound of drums for a really long time, and I like my
Absolutely.
dad doesn't like rock, like uh, he was like into disco, in the 70s. He was like the
Okay.
antithesis of a rocker. My mom grew up in Illinois. She loved rock, so she kind of got me into
Mhm.
that. And I remember we were in the car and we had like a Led Zeppelin album, and when the Levee Breaks was on, and like those drums just start, and my dad just looked over and he like turned up the stereo, and I was like, yeah, it's like undeniable.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you don't like rock, like though that is just like a sound that is, and it's just drums, it's just like this big drum sound, and it's so epic.
It's
it's great,
unbelievable.
man.
You know, I listeners of this podcast will know that will not be surprised that now I'm going to want to talk about John Bonham because I'm obsessed.
Of
But
course.
but um, well, I just think that like it's so. like you said, it is such a common pick. But I think too that there are shades of him that can get overlooked, but they contribute subconsciously to why we all love his drumming so much. It's like the subtleties in in a track like rock and roll,
Mm,
um, where he's playing these straight eighth notes on the snare drum, but when you're younger, like when you first listen to the song, it doesn't hit you. Like you have to really listen to hear that there's not just like one, two, three, four. Like he's not just playing a backbeat, you know? And there's this, and he's constantly doing stuff like that. I did two videos, two lessons so far on YouTube where I broke down these like I made it like super simple, but I picked these two random parts of Zeppelin tunes. I picked the one video was the bridge to "Fool in the Rain," so it's kind of like that Latin thing, you know.
right,
And it's just that snare part that like I feel like no drummer ever like everybody focuses on the halftime shuffle because that's
right,
so epic in that song.
right.
But then you got to play that section and it's always a mess. Like every time there's somebody doing it,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like and, and so I'm like, this is a fun topic, and but there's so much happening there. It's on paper, it can look like okay, he's just playing 16th notes and he's like accenting certain things, but there's so much feel and detail into that part. It's matching beautifully with what John Paul Jones is playing on the piano, and the other one I did was how many more times on
Mhm.
Zeppelin one that like I called it the Hunter because like that's like the lyrics that I remember from like what Robert Plant is singing. But after the bow solo
Mhm.
that Page does, there's that really sick. It's like a secondary song within a song.
Right.
And he comes in with this snare drum groove that is unbelievably funky. Like you'd swear he was playing funk. But it's
Yeah.
heavy and powerful, and the dynamics in there. Um, there's so many things like that. Like I feel like uh, you get into Bonham's drumming and you instantly gravitate towards like things like maybe the ending of Stairway to Heaven, the drums are monstrous there, or a whole lot of love, the groove, or the immigrant song, or maybe the Rover, you know. Um, but yeah, there are those little things,
Yeah,
that are
man.
just like those little sections.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about, of course, Moby Dick and the fills and the triplets. But man, those little details, even on Coda, which is like it's kind of like a B-sides record in the sense of
Right.
like there are songs that didn't make the cut.
Right.
But listen to some of the drums on there.
Insane.
Actually,
Insane.
you just made me think of "Poor Tom." That song. Maybe I should do it. We should do a video on "Poor Tom."
Dude,
But
literally, I mean, name any Zeppelin song, do it, and then you're gonna have an
yeah,
amazing John Bonham part, and then you're gonna have subtleties of his playing that you never even noticed as well. And
yeah,
one thing about Bonham and Zeppelin in general, so you mentioned Mayer, and I think May because there's different types of musicians just because of like the time that we're in now, and John Mayer's a musician that you can really appreciate the way that he looks back and pays tribute. And each of his albums feel like his last album, Sob Rock, that was like an 80s tribute. And then the one before
yeah,
that was like almost like a funk Motown kind of tribute, In the Search of Everything. And then, he has Continuum, which is, there's all his different albums are like looking back at these different periods of time. And he's like, for me, almost like paying homage to that while being an amazing songwriter and guitarist. But if you can go back in time and you can listen to like Led Zeppelin 1 for the first time, like you'd literally like just it's literally like a bomb going off.
oh,
Like there was nothing like it at the time. So
yeah.
it's really cool to be the first to kind of introduce something like that, to introduce a sound. And I just I love that. I wish I'm always looking for that, when there's like something where it's like, wow, this is the first time the world's hearing this, and because I think we need both. I think we need people that are trying to make something happen for the first time, but then we also need people that are looking back, appreciating what was good, and then making something new with that too. I think that's really important.
Oh, totally. You have to have both. You have to have both because the old stuff does influence even the new epic things. It's like
Yeah,
because even with Zeppelin, like yeah, there was nothing like it. Um, but you can hear their core influences like the more you dig into it, right? The more you
right.
dig into the originality of them, you could be like, oh wow, they're referencing John Lee Hooker or something like that. Um, but man, yeah, it's so true. The record, the Mayer record that really blew my mind. Like Continuum was the one that caught my attention,
Hmm.
and then years later, when he did, I feel like it's not. I feel like I'm the only one that's like obsessed with this album, but I'm so obsessed with it. Is Born and Raised. Like
Hmm.
that album, I just like I lost my mind when I heard that. I was like, it was so different for him. Um, and it's very Dylan-y, but
Right.
obviously he's an amazing singer, so he wasn't doing the Dylan voice or anything. The songs were beautiful, and like um, I feel like Aaron Sterling played drums on that, but I could be wrong. But like the drum parts were amazing. He always has a great band, like no matter
Right.
what, Pino Palladino played with him on so many records. It's
Yeah.
just like obviously Steve Jordan, that goes without saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
You said
yeah,
Mayer, so
Born and Raised.
I wasn't gonna say Steve Jordan, but for the same reason, I
Yeah,
love Steve Jordan. I mean, not only John, he goes back so far, but yeah, and I mean,
yeah,
one day John Mayer has to get his flowers too, because who can put out this
mhm,
many really different type of genre defining albums? Because each album is a cohesive album, has a theme, has a
yeah,
Born and Raised is like completely different than anything else, but it's very much its own thing. Every album has its own thing. It's not like he has an album and it's kind of like a compilation of different stuff. He's like, you can tell for years he like really gets into something and he's like, I'm gonna make the best type
yes,
of this album, and it works
yep,
every time. It's just
every single
crazy.
time. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Um, all right, let's do one more each.
Okay.
Round out with three. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Wait, you did you just go?
I
Yes, you went
did. I
John
just said
Lennon.
Bonham.
Okay. Okay, so now I gotta think. Um, Man. So like you mentioned some that I love, like you mentioned Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I don't want to pick Stevie because it's too like I kind of I picked John Mayer. That's like
It's okay.
I know they're not the same guitar player, but it's
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 the
close. But let me think. Let me think. Let me
okay.
think.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see if we can get somebody. Um, Man, you know what? Because I'm trying to think of ones that have like just unbelievably impacted my playing. And you mentioned him outside of the game we're playing, but it's so real. Is Jeff Beck, definitely Jeff Beck, because because blow by blow, and I mean any record I've heard from him, but the two albums that were like life changing for me as a drummer were definitely Blow by Blow and Wired. And like the drums on those albums are amazing. Yes, 150%. But the guitar playing, like the opening track, was it You Know What I Mean? Is that the name of the song? The first song on, I think it's something like that, right? On Blow by Blow. That funky little chord thing he's doing,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
um, instantly is just like, okay, now I need to play drums. Like, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, and then like Scatterbrain, like that riff is just madness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say those would be my three that are really sticking out in my mind right now. Um, yeah, Jeff Beck.
Okay. Yeah, Jeff Paul. I got a real soft spot for Jeff Beck, so I can definitely appreciate that. My my third, and this one, I feel like maybe this is another boring pick, but maybe not. I think this guy maybe doesn't get as much credit from most people because of the guitarist that was in the band, but I really, really, really always liked Mitch Mitchell. I think
Oh yeah.
he, for me, I mean, when you have to play drums in a band like that, it's it's so hard because number one, of the pieces in the band, right? It's a three piece. So you already have a larger kind of presence in the band, right? And it's just impressive that he not only did he like hang, for me, I found myself in the verses listening more to the drums than I would any other part. I don't know what just like the grooves he would hit, and like just and the tone. Like at that time, like mid '60s, drums were kind of like
Yeah.
tinny, and they weren't really great.
Yes.
And it wasn't
Yeah.
like uh I don't think the production on a lot of the early like Hendrix records were like great because of the time, but
Mhm.
they everyone still got an amazing sound somehow. And I think
Yeah.
it speaks to their
Yep.
musicianship and their touch and their feel. And so that was really like a turning point for me when I heard those records. And again, I always try to put it in the time when, I try to imagine like, okay, what would this be like in 1967, And it just like,
Yeah.
whoa, that's actually mind blowing. People take that for granted. And I don't think they go back and they think about it then. Um, but yeah, man, Mitch Mitchell, love it.
Unbelievable. And I totally agree. I totally agree with everything you said. Couple things you said specifically, though. People definitely don't do that enough. Don't view what's happening on this album or this song in context of the time. They're just instantly comparing it to modern day, whatever your thing is. Um, but I also completely agree. Mitch Mitchell definitely does isn't talked about enough. Like, of course, like drummers will talk about him, like professional drummers will be like always quote, they'll talk about him. But the average person, yeah, I think, like you said, it's because he was backing Jimmy. Um, but man, and then also I think the other thing that contributed was they were only around for such a short period of time, and then right after that, you had well, at the same time, I think you had Ginger Baker, right? Playing with Cream. Was Cream around
Hmm.
the same time
Yeah,
as
right around the same
yeah.
time.
So you had Ginger Baker, and then right after you had Zeppelin with John Bonham, and I imagine I don't exactly know when the Who first came out, but Keith Moon was another one that
R- Around the same
around
time.
that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a
And
time
so
for
you had
drummers.
these, well, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But you had and like I mean, Cream was also a shorter lived band. Ginger Baker though seemed to kind of just live on into the 70s,
Hmm.
as a mainstay drummer, and obviously Bonham all throughout the 70s and Keith Moon, of course. And so I feel like those three kind of then took the spotlight. And there was and with the recording technology improving, you had their contemporary albums. It was like the drums were becoming bigger and bigger and bigger
Right.
sounding. And but the work that Mitchell did in on those Hendrix albums is as good, if not better, than anything the other guys did.
Right.
In some respects.
Right. Right.
Um, he played drums. I remember I had a really fun conversation with one of our fellow instructors at Guitar Center, Frank, about because he's a big Mitch Mitchell fan, like
Hmm.
obsessed. Like at least back then he was talking to me about Mitchell, and um, I remember saying like we were kind of talking about the like one of the things that I think was so special with Mitch Mitchell is you could hear his love of jazz in his
Mm,
playing. The
hmm.
way he like attacked everything, like his solos were almost like jazz comping for a
Right,
drummer,
right,
you know, and where you know, I believe you can hear Bonham's love also of jazz drumming in his playing, but it's different, like there's a ground up from him where Mitch Mitchell to me is almost top down the way a jazz drummer is top down
right,
as far as
right,
sound. It's like cymbal,
right.
snare, toms, then kick, you know,
Yes,
and Ginger Baker is also, I think Ginger Baker's done a lot of interviews where he says he's like an aficionado on jazz. But in my opinion, when you listen to Ginger Baker, he's bottom up drumming. It's like
right, right.
super loud drums. Um, whereas yeah, Mitch, it's like yeah, no, there's this. He has a different language than his other peers.
You're
You
so
know,
right about that.
and none
Yeah.
of them did his thing.
The way he like uses his ride cymbal is completely different than those other three.
Yep.
You said it's top down, and like, those or yeah, those other three. So out of the four of them, yeah, Mitch Mitchell was the first to drop off, the smallest body of work, and kind of gets washed away. But for me, I have a great appreciation for him, and I think it complemented what Hendrix was doing so well. I'm not saying if you give like it just completely changes what the Jimi Hendrix experience was, and what
Yeah.
his sound was at the time. I mean, if you put John Bonham in the Jimi Hendrix experience, it still sounds great, but it's
Yeah.
completely different. It's completely different.
Completely different.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have like. Yeah, it'd be great, but those things are those records are so special the way they are, and
right,
the way Hendrix approached playing is also dramatically different from the way Jimmy Page approached playing.
right.
And and that sound that Hendrix had, it just lended itself so perfectly to Mitchell's top down approach.
Right.
Like you just listen at like any of those songs, especially when they're like ripping in tempo, like if you think about Fire,
Hmm.
like the drum, it's just like it's just we're just plowing full steam ahead with
Right.
high pitched sound, and it sounds pleasant to the ears.
Yeah.
It's not like screeching at you.
Right. It's so hard to keep that tight and then also keep it like in that pocket of pleasurable sound, like that could get away
Yeah,
from a lot of drummers that are really like heavy-handed and loud. That song would have like flew out the window. Instead, it's like right
yeah,
there.
really tight. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, was the experience the one? Did they cover All Along the Watchtower, or was that Jimi
Yes.
Hendrix like later? That
I
was
think
that.
I think that
Yeah,
was, yeah, that was Mitch Mitchell.
yeah, it's
Uh
so good.
yeah.
I'm obsessed with that rendition of that song. It's like, I mean, Hendrix is amazing on that track. Singing and playing, like it's just so
Yes.
good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um yeah, I think All Along the Watchtower, that was yeah, I think it was this off the second album, I think. What's it called?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Electric
yeah.
Ladyland?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
man. Well, those are great. Those are great picks. That was fun, man. That was a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That was a lot of fun. And I just love to hear, because, I hear about what guitarists like all the time, but to hear from a drummer
Mhm.
is really cool, and why you like what you like, and, it's awesome. The Prince pick. I should have known. That was the one that really surprised me.